So we're moving into the section called Our Brave New World of Digital Health. The developments that are happening are, honestly, I try to track everything, and honestly, I just cannot keep up with the developments that are coming out. So let's move on to the next section of the day. Next session is called Empowering Our Superminds. And I want to introduce you to Dr. Daniel Kraft. He's the faculty chair and founding executive director of Singularity University. And I'm sorry, the founding executive director of Exponential Medicine. Misheard that. And Daniel's New Year's resolution is to be more mindful, which is absolutely apropos for this next session.
Thanks, Jill, and welcome to this sort of session where we're going to look a little bit into the future of our minds and technology and how they meld. I think it's, one of the themes of digital health is the past of medicine, including neuroscience, is very reactive and intermittent, and where digital health and these technologies can take us into a near future that's much more proactive and continuous. And there's technologies we're going to talk about with our panelists, Ariel and Robert, that are really, I think, on point about where technology is taking our minds, and how that's really an important shift as we move from quantified self to even quantified brain. So I'm going to ask each to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll dive in. Ariel.
Sure. Thanks, Daniel. My name is Ariel Garten. I'm the CEO of InteraXon, and we make a product, Muse, the brain sensing headband. Muse is a brain fitness tool that helps you do more with your mind, tracks your brain activity in real time, and sends it to your smartphone or tablet. And from there, gives you exercises that you can do to improve your cognitive function and decrease your stress. Muse is actually on market now. It's a device that you can buy in Best Buy or Amazon, and also in clinical use, which I'm sure we'll talk more about.
Right. And I'm actually a muser, as you call it, a muser. And what's interesting about this is you really get again, quantified brain, which in our sort of very continually partial attention world, I've found just using the app really helps you measure, are you really, is your brain active, or are you in a much more chill state? And I think part of, as a physician, I think not just with apps, but we'll be prescribing devices and the apps that go with them to help achieve both mindfulness and address clinical issues. Robert's coming to us from the UK.
Hello there, everyone. Yeah, I'm over from London in the UK. I have been working with a product designer called Lee McCormack for a good few years, and he came up with something called Orrb, which is a device about 5 foot tall by about 6 foot, so you get inside of it, and it's a product design. It's being manufactured at the moment and has been in use for the last couple of years over in New York at the Happy Institute, and is currently in use in the Walter Reed Medical Institute over in Washington. And it's a device that is there to aid recovery. It's something that you get inside of. It's almost like an egg that allows you to cut yourself off from the world. My involvement is on something called Orrb, which is launching in April, which is a corporate wellness device. We're expecting these devices to go into offices. It's a direct reaction against the notion that we should be switched on all the time. It's about creating your own enclave, but it's also hooked up to an account where you can access meditation to boost, test, and relax. So it's about learning, and it's about meditation, and putting wellness and productivity together for a positive work culture.
So in this new digital health world, we're just really at the early stages of being able to get feedback from our brain. There's been feedback mechanisms in the past, biofeedback, but now with basically consumer versions of a brain-computer interface, you can start to measure interesting things. So maybe Ariel, give us a flavor of what's actually measured here, and what does that reflect about what's happening in the brain, and what are some of the early use cases that you're seeing today?
Sure. So Muse is a clinical-grade EEG, 4 channels, 2 frontal, 2 temporal. So it can measure anything an EEG can. The application that we've built that ships with it first is basically a focused attention training tool. So what we're looking at there is when you're in a state of focused attention and when your mind has wandered. And we give you real-time feedback to teach you to build states of focused attention. What that does is it helps you improve your cognitive functions so that you avoid the distractions around you, the sounds, the lights, the stuff in your environment. And it also teaches you to avoid and understand your internal distractions, the negative thoughts, negative feelings, ruminations, things that come up inside you that cause stress and take you away from where you want to be. So we're seeing people use the device to improve their attention, to work better in the workplace, particularly in open offices. We're seeing families use it to self-regulate so moms don't yell at their kids, and you reduce your stress and you improve your emotional understanding. And then we're also seeing a wide range of clinical use cases, people using it as a clinical grade EEG to look at autism, epilepsy, ADHD, and more.
So one of the use cases that blends both of your technologies is sort of the workplace, the stressful environment where a lot is happening. Our ability to be focused and not distracted is key. And we're seeing companies from Google to others start teaching mindfulness and meditation to their employees to improve their performance, at least the base level. So with the Orrb, do you see these being in the CEO's office or in the break hall to help tune the mind?
Well, for a start, obviously wellness is for everybody. And one of the reasons why we're doing this is because I think we all feel that it would be great to have somewhere that is, every employee needs to feel at home with their working environment. And we all need to take time out. One of the investors in this product said the only time he can take time out, he is the CEO of the company, but the only time he can take time out is when he goes to the restroom, which I think is something that we all feel. So we're trying to conquer that. And I think that, yeah, obviously wellness is for everyone. We're saying it's, each device is capable of taking in or absorbing. I mean, obviously you use it one at a time, but it's for 50 employees at a time. And the way that we set it up is that it's like an airline calendar model. You have access to an account. So every employee should have access to wellness, absolutely.
And inside the pod, you're getting sort of feedback as well about what your brain state is.
Well, there's two different aspects to this. Orrb is what we're working with in the medical side of things, where we're putting it, like we're saying, we're working with Walter Reed. And also the Brain Forum is in Lausanne in Switzerland, will be there in 30th of March. The Orrb is that side of it. But we're seeing OrbX as something that's easily and readily accessible. It's a very simple notion. Even just by getting into the device, you're already in the zone. By equipping it with content that's already out there that you'd otherwise have to go to a seminar like this to see, means that companies can direct information or meditation or wellness at individuals. And it's about personalization, but it's not about necessarily people doing it outside of work time. It should be part of the working process.
I really want an Orrb, just for the record. I really want a little pod that I can go into that's going to bring me the space of peace and calm. Sounds amazing.
And where that's going to blend is with technologies like augmented reality, whether you're in a Oculus Rift with your EEG measured or using Google Glass. I think the sort of blending of these to create your own super environments will be interesting. So we've talked about sort of the mindfulness piece. I've found in my experience, I can now get to sort of a meditative state more quickly. But you're able to crowdsource this now. You've got thousands of people using this. There are people developing apps on top of this. What are some of the interesting insights you've gotten on that level?
Totally. So we have tens of thousands of users and probably one of the largest databases of brain data anywhere right now. And so we're able to actually go in and see remarkable changes across age, across a person over time using the device. We're able to do things like find markers for brain age that change decade by decade. And then we have a developer base of about probably 1,000 developers building everything from thought-controlled flying robotic helicopters to really serious games where kids can use a tool like this to improve their ADHD.
To that point, so ADHD, a big problem, usually treated with pharmacologic agents. I've actually experienced in Singapore a BCI headset where when you were in the focus mode, the game would go. You get kids to learn sort of endemically by gaming when they get in focus state, and they've gotten them off of Ritalin, for example. Yeah,
so there's lots of great clinical research demonstrating that doing neurofeedback for ADHD is as effective as Ritalin in improving ADHD symptoms.
So quite disruptive. And then how do you see the sort of medicalized side of these going as well?
Well, I mean, one of the benefits of what we're doing appears to be, the reason why it's been taken up by the Brain Forum over Lausanne, is that it is a space that you can access clean data from patients. It's also repeatable, and there's also an issue of, or not an issue, but a benefit of scalability. So there's two things: using it as a tool for that kind of thing, and also using it as a tool to capture data and to. I have to say, we are in the very early stages of this, and I don't want to have any conjecture about where it could go. But certainly, the kind of interest that we're getting is moving, from my strategy point of view, towards a place where. What interests me about this is the fact that it is repeatable, and it is scalable, and it is a neutral space. So think about the kind of things like, you know, with Muse, for instance, you know, you say you really want one. I'm not surprised, because it is a place that you can work with a specific kind of item and repeat it over a number of times with a number of different patients.
So you bring up a really nice point, which is this kind of changes the way that we do science. Mm-hmm. So with tools like yours and tools like Muse, we can now deploy science experiments where we can have 500 people all tracking brain data during a period of time and watching their changes. We have pharma companies, for example, using Muse to look at biomarkers, neurobiomarkers for things like depression, anxiety, weight loss, and track them over time, and then track them against their drug use over time to see improvements in drugs.
So these can really be, again, diagnostic platforms, whether it's to pick up early dementia, Parkinson's, attention issues. There's also the element of the feedback loop element. We talked a bit before the session. Now we're seeing the blending of brain gaming and brain-computer interface to the point where you can not just do an exercise, but have movement involved and have that EEG signal then revert to a pattern back to your brain, whether that's sound or visual, or even now energy back to the brain. There's a few companies, Think, Focus, and others, where they're applying energy to the brain itself. So where do you see the near future of the feedback loop and sort of super enabling our brain from normal state or a disease state?
So feedback loop is kind of, you know, fundamental to this entire engagement. We started by doing fun things where you could control stuff outside of you with your brain, and then we recognized that the biggest thing that we do here is actually help you understand and improve your own mind. And that feedback loop, that reflection back to you about your brain activity, is the thing that helps you improve. We create fun feedback loops like audio, so that you can hear the sound of your own mind or see your brain activity, which then intuitively teaches your brain to improve. We can also do crazy feedback loops like letting the lights in the room change according to your brain state. And as we look at things like stimulation technologies, ultrasound technologies, things that require a reading sensor in order to then give feedback so you can enhance various functions and almost into a cyborg, type transhumanistic space, I see the future as really bright when we think about our brains and how we understand them, reflect back on them, learn about them, share about them, and ultimately improve them.
And ultimately, I think with both these platforms and others, it's a bit of a long tail. You can really tune that to the individual. My normal EEG in a meditative or active state will be quite different. When you're in the pod, you may have, it's going to learn your mindset and what works for you, right?
Well, I think the whole idea is, I think, as you said, Daniel, while I was reading up before I came in, I think you'd said, we want to get to people before they become patients. And I think that's very true. Certainly, when we talk about corporate responsibility, when we're looking at how we're going to target Orrb, it's like, well, if most of your employees are getting out and you're losing money through stress, which is obviously the biggest killer, then you should be providing for people so that they don't become patients. So half of what we're doing is a medical facility, but half of what we're doing as well with this product is saying, well, look, if you use this on a regular basis, perhaps you won't need to take that time out.
Yeah, prevention is pretty key. I mean, they say 60 to 90% of all doctors' visits are due to stress-related illness. And if you can target the stress, you reduce the, cardiac care impact. You reduce a whole range of issues. I
mean, there's some really impactful work by Dean Ornish and others that look at meditation, connection, group, mindset in terms of reversing heart disease. So I think we're at the early stages of the sort of digital neuroscience revolution where being able to quantify the brain, help folks tune it, are going to impact everything from cardiovascular disease to schizophrenia. And interact now with one of the themes at CES is like the Internet of Things. Your environment can be tuned not just when you're in a pod, but when you're at home and your desktop computer with the camera is measuring your stress level, your emotional state, and go take a Muse break or a pod break.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny, isn't it? Because I'm not so sure where I sit on all of this. I mean, I certainly know. I mean, this is one of the things we were laughing before we came on about the idea that you said, don't go to the mountain. I'm all for mountains. If they're little mountains that you can climb to the top of and then walk down and then go away. I think everyone needs that little personal kind of space. So part of what this is about really for us is to learn how to switch off. And there is no argument, because obviously we're using technology in order to save ourselves from technology in what we're doing, because the reason why this came about is because we knew that we'd enter this situation where you never switch off, you're always stressed out. So this for me, as a non-medical practitioner coming in and talking about all this, it's like, wow, we're saving it, but we're also causing more, because the more you know, the more you're kind of, yeah, so I don't know, what do you think about that?
So the reference, Don't Go to the Mountain, was a talk that I had a long time ago that said we do not need to retreat. In the past, if you wanted to find solace in your life, you would go to the mountaintop and retreat. And we are not here to retreat. We're here to be, engaged, full human beings in every moment of our life. And so it's not about finding spaces to retreat. It's about finding the moments in your life that you can take to find new ways to get in touch with yourself, energize yourself, and be present at all times, not run away.
Yeah, I mean, on that thing, I would say that on that kind of technical side of it, that we're sort of angling Orrb as a kind of reboot, because I think we all do need that. I think your New Year's resolution, what was it, mindfulness? Yeah. So, I think that reboot is important, and the ability to take yourself out and to do whatever it takes to make it.
Well, that's now being this idea of doing a digital technology detox, taking our technology Shabbat on Saturdays. A lot of these things we're talking about here, using the Muse and otherwise, are ancient traditions sort of now connected. Meditation from the Eastern traditions or others, or being in the flow is now being sort of quantifiable. And what I think could be interesting now, given that so much of our healthcare is related to our mind-body connection, is setting some of these incentives to track, trigger, and get these involved in our daily lives. Just like technologies like the wearable devices that track our steps and our sleep, these can start, and that even if you never look at the data, it could be a little mindfulness clue that I want to walk 10,000 steps a day or get my 7 hours of sleep. Starting to pay attention to our mind states.
It's a really tricky one for me, is working out the kind of strategy and how we're going to do something which is really has never, as far as I can understand it, never been done before. Where you're saying to corporations, provide this space for your employees where they can go in and be away from you, and there's a whole number of sales issues. But I think the time is right. Obviously, corporations are realizing that they have to do something. And the current situation has not really caught up with where we're all at in terms of our understanding and knowledge about what's capable. So we're trying to bridge that gap. And there is a kind of corporate culture or thing of kind of saying, well, people should manage themselves. We all should manage ourselves. But I think the other side of it, of course, is, well, should corporations be managing, the way that we feel or the way that we operate? But I don't think it's about that. I think you can marry the two. I think that you can have a decentralized, personalized system put in place by your employer. And I think that that's the way it should go.
Or employer, eventually you may just put one of these in your home.
You can do that as well.
Chairs that will massage us.
I'm very interested in the larger picture. I'd like to see this I'd like to see this, in larger spaces. Right. So I chair the medicine track at Singularity University and run a program called Exponential Medicine. So we're looking at where the puck is going in, let's say, 2 to 5 years. Ariel, you're on top of this trajectory. Where do you think brain-computer interfaces like yours, blending with other technologies, will be in the next 2 to 5 years?
So in 2 years, you're going to see pretty broad-scale deployment of things like this. So we're already in places like Best Buy. There's a clinical-grade EEG in Best Buy right now. So that's kind of showing where the puck is going. We are starting to get into healthcare facilities. We have over 50 institutions that are using Muse to look at sleep, stress, anxiety, and more. Mayo is looking at stress for chemotherapy sufferers. Harvard's looking at sleep. So you're going to start to see those research studies, trickle down into hospitals actually using tools like this. From a consumer perspective, 5 years from now, there's probably going to be 500,000 of these devices out there. You're going to start to see payers get on board with providing reimbursement for, starting for the Fitbits and then trickling down to even brain devices. 10 years from now, this is going to be a standard way that people interact with their mind and themselves. And 25 years from now, this kind of device is going to be a regular way that you interact with the devices in your life. So your iTunes playlist is going to know that you're stressed and play music that it knows relax you, or it's going to know that you're depressed and, notify your play music to you, and then let you notify your doctor.
And I think along those lines, there are brain-computer interfaces that can now be, with a mindless surgical procedure, put in the brain and enable a quadriplegic to move a robotic limb, for example. The challenge with the sort of wearable ones is they can't quite get that fidelity. Where are we now with the ability to control on and off light switches or fly a drone?
Sure. So from a control perspective, with a low sensor count system, you're looking at really basic control. Forward, back. That's it. It's not a fine movement. Down the road, we're going to start to see a merger of stimulation technologies and passive recording technologies. So passive is where it is at right now, but we're starting to see stimulation companies like Think and like Focus and like a few more rise up. 5 years from now, stimulation is actually going to be a kind of more common intervention that people are more comfortable with on a consumer level.
Right. So these are, again, two companies that are building headsets which will provide energy into the brain, either focused ultrasound, magnetic, or electrical. So as you project, let's say 2020, and the workspace and the home space with the blending of all these
I've no idea. I mean, I think that what we're aiming to do is, I think what we're all aiming to do is to empower, enable, and enhance, if I can get the word out. No matter what sector you're in of digital technology, that's really what you're trying to do. So where we're looking at, obviously, when we started, or when Lee McCormack started this project 10 years ago, there was a kind of understanding, that technology would be making a severe impact on the workplace and our own personal time and space, which is why the product started. Now we're at a time where that obviously has been proven, and the ability to take 5, 10, 15 minutes of time is seen as a luxury. I'd like to think that in 2020 that won't be so much of a luxury. We now know it's a necessity. It will be part of an everyday occurrence. I'd like to see the marriage of analog and digital in physical products a lot more, not just wearables, but in terms of actual product design, rather like Orrb. It is an ostentatious device in some respects. It looks like something out of Mork and Mindy, and it's a product that you likes of you wouldn't really see generally. So I'd like to see more people experimenting with physical spaces. Certainly what we've learned from working with Walter Reed and organisations like the Brain Forum is that there is a need to carry on thinking about the human body in space, not just about something that you wear. And I think that's what I'd like to see, certainly in the medical industry.
Right, and a Walter Reed application might be for patients who suffer from post-traumatic stress
disorder.
disorder.
Right, that's what we're working on at the moment.
With a little bit left, what about some other really interesting areas that blend measuring the brain and learning, education? I think there's a huge opportunity now to start looking at how someone's focused or how they learn maybe from their brainwaves in real time.
Totally. We have a study going with NYU with Dr. Jan Plass, and we're looking at Muse and how it works in education in 2 ways. So one is by musing, doing focused attention training, you are able to see an improvement in test scores and a decrease in stress. We actually have a university in Canada, UOIT, doing that study right now. And then we're also tracking learning on computerized learning platforms like Cerigo and seeing the improvements in learning using a tool like this and tracking what happens in the brain during learning. So when you start with computerized learning environments where you have, tens of thousands of people who are doing really defined tasks that can be tagged inside the application, you can really easily do great science tracking the changes in brain state that happen during very specific learning modalities with very specific cues.
And really, both of these are sort of open source platforms. So you mentioned briefly, folks can go to Muse and propose an application and program it using this technology platform for education, for stress, for PTSD, what have you.
Yeah, you can go to dev.interaxon.ca, download the SDK, and run away and build your own apps.
Any closing thoughts on the future of the brain technology and workplace?
I think it's already in place. I mean, I don't think that I could say anything that isn't already known by a lot of people. We need to look after this, and we all have a responsibility, if we're an employer, to look after our staff. The more stress we give people, the more likely they are to mess up themselves and our businesses. So, if we want to look after the world, we have to start with the thing that produces all of this.
And the fact that we don't live in silos. We're connected
We
as
don't.
companies,
We're connected,
as individuals.
yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you might have two people on a headset at one time, or both wearing separate headsets, and looking at their interaction, whether it's a love connection or work interaction. Maybe briefly mention.
Sure. I mean, there are fun studies that demonstrate that when you have two people in rapport, their brainwaves entrain. And when you actually have groups in rapport, you start to see the same things happening. So there are ways to look at group dynamics and group interactions using brain activity that will reveal things that we possibly haven't even imagined.
All right, well, I think it's an interesting, brave new world. I encourage you all to try some form of mindfulness, whether it's technology-enabled or otherwise, and look at how you can take any aspects of your digital health world and start to connect it to the mind-body connection. So I think it's a really interesting era where these sort of feedback loops are becoming emergent, and with the big data, analytics, AI, bringing that to our workspace, our home, our clinic, are going to have really tremendous implications across the healthcare spectrum.
Well, the brain is the next frontier, and we're all sitting on it.
That's right. Thanks very much.